When Johnny's stabbing your grandfather, is it mainly in the torso or? Okay.
Yeah, he just, I don't know why he did that, but he just kept going.
How many times? More than two, more
Yeah,
five?
more than five.
Okay.
It was more than five.
Saturday, April 8th, 2017, just after midnight. A quiet street in Gwinnett County, Georgia. Brick facades, trimmed lawns, the kind of neighborhood where nothing is supposed to happen. Inside one of these houses, a 63-year-old woman named Wendy Bujork is asleep. Her husband Randall, also 63, is asleep in the next room. Downstairs, the doors are locked. Upstairs, everything is still. At the back gate of the property, two teenagers are waiting. A 17-year-old girl and her boyfriend. They've been here before, earlier in the night, watching the windows, waiting for the lights to go out. Now they move. The girl has her own key. She unlocks the back door herself. Within the hour, both of the people sleeping inside this house will be dead. Their throats will be cut, their hands and ankles bound with duct tape, and the girl standing at that door will be their own granddaughter. By the time anyone finds out what happened here, the bodies will have been lying in that house for 6 days. And when police finally release a statement about what they discovered, they will say something that, 8 years later, still stops people cold. This is a very unique and disturbing case on so many levels. We may never find a scenario that makes sense to a reasonable person. This is the story of the Bujork murders. And by the end of it, you'll understand exactly why detectives said that. Because there is no clean answer here. There's just a series of choices made by a 17-year-old girl and the boyfriend who helped her make them. To understand what happened in that house, you have to understand who was living in it. Wendy and Randall Bujork were in their early 60s, built the kind of life people build after decades of steady work, a comfortable home in an upper-middle-class Gwinnett County neighborhood, a marriage that had lasted, friends and family who paid attention when they went quiet. That last part mattered more than anyone could have known. Wendy and Randall were also raising their teenage granddaughter, Cassandra, known as Cassie. Cassie's own parents had not been able to raise her, for reasons court records only address in general terms. So her grandparents had become her legal safety net. Not quite parents, but the two people standing between her and nothing. Being that safety net is not easy work, and Wendy in particular carried the weight of it. In the year before her death, she reported Cassie as a runaway 18 separate times. By the time this case was over, the total number of calls Wendy had made to law enforcement about her granddaughter had reached 31. 31 calls. 31 attempts to get help holding a teenager in place who kept trying to leave. Randall is harder to find in the record. He appears in smaller details. But one of those details matters more than almost anything else in this case, and we'll come back to it. In the weeks before his death, Randall started hiding his wallet under his mattress at night. His cell phone, too. A man in his own bedroom, in his own house, quietly tucking away the small objects of his daily life from someone else who lived there. He never told anyone why. He never called the police. He just hid what he could. Hold on to that. It's going to matter later. By any account, Cassie Bujork was a kid in serious trouble. 18 runaway reports in a single year isn't a phase. It's the trail of someone actively pulling against everything trying to hold her in place. A few months before April 2017, she met a boy named Johnny Ryder. He drove a Honda. He had a sister named Mindy. The relationship was new, a matter of months. But in the way these things go at 17, it had already become the center of her world. In late March, a few weeks before the murders, Cassie came home past curfew after being with Johnny. Her grandfather was already asleep. Her grandmother was waiting up. The argument that followed was, by Cassie's own account, brief. She left the house. For the next 2 or 3 days, she stayed with Johnny, sleeping by her description in his car. It was sometime during those days apart that the two of them had a conversation at a local park, Pittman Park in her account, that would end in 2 people dead. According to Cassie's own later statement to detectives, Johnny asked her a question first. "Are you afraid to die?" She said no. She asked him the same question back. He said no either. Then he started talking about running away together, the dream of just leaving everything behind. And in the middle of that conversation, he asked her directly, would she kill her grandparents? She hesitated. She asked him why. He said he already understood everything she'd been through with her family, and that it might be easier this way. What followed wasn't an impulsive outburst, it was planning. Cassie has stated that the two of them worked out in that same conversation what time they'd go to the house, how they'd get in, and what they would need to bring. They decided on a time, around midnight or 1:30 in the morning, because Wendy typically went to sleep between 11:30 and midnight. They planned to park down the road near a neighborhood park, directly behind the Bujorks' backyard, and wait. On the night of April 8th, they arrived a little earlier than planned, while Wendy's lights were still on. They waited near a shed in the backyard until the lights went out. Cassie had her own set of keys to the house. She used them to unlock the back door herself. They came prepared. A tire iron taken from Johnny's car. A black backpack containing duct tape and gloves. Both of them wore gloves. They split up inside the house. Johnny went into Randall's bedroom. Cassie followed. According to her own account, Johnny began attacking Randall with his fists. In the room next door, hearing the struggle, Cassie says something shifted in her. She describes it as getting the rush. She turned to her grandmother and began hitting her in the head with a tire iron. When Johnny finished with Randall, he came into the room and helped Cassie bind her grandmother's hands and ankles with the duct tape they'd brought. They dragged Wendy into Randall's room so that both grandparents were now in the same space. At that point, Johnny asked Cassie to get knives. She went downstairs to the kitchen and returned with 3 large butcher knives. While Johnny began stabbing Randall, Cassie turned her attention elsewhere. She already knew her grandmother kept a safe in her closet. She just didn't know the combination. She asked Wendy for the code, while her grandmother lay bound on the floor. Wendy gave it to her. Cassie went into the closet, found the safe, and began emptying it into the backpack. Envelopes stuffed with cash, roughly $1,000 in total that the couple had been saving. She went back to the bedroom and told Johnny she had the money. Randall's throat was cut next. Then the two of them dragged Wendy, still alive, into the bathroom. Cassie has said she doesn't know why they chose the bathroom specifically. It simply wasn't the bedroom. Johnny cut Wendy's throat as well. Cassie struck her in the back of the head with a tire iron, aiming by Johnny's own instruction at the spine, where he told her a single solid hit could render someone unconscious before death. It didn't work as described. According to Cassie, Wendy continued showing signs of life for some time afterward. Cassie checked on her more than once and reported back to Johnny that her grandmother was still breathing. Johnny delivered what Cassie describes as the final blow before cutting her throat a second time. Afterward, the two of them left the house. They drove to a nearby grocery store, Cassie names either Kroger or Publix, bought food, and came back. What happened over the following 6 days is, in some ways, the most disturbing part of this case. Not because of violence, but because of its ordinariness. Cassie and Johnny moved in and out of the house over the following days. They told no one what had happened. Cassie told her friends her grandparents had gone on a 2-week vacation. They took Wendy's purse from her car. They searched for Randall's wallet and couldn't find it because, as we mentioned earlier, he'd hidden it under his mattress in the weeks before his death, along with his phone. Cassie has said, on record, that when detectives eventually found it there, she found the detail almost funny, that her grandfather had been smart enough to hide it, because they'd nearly missed it entirely. Using Wendy's own phone, Cassie began responding to text messages from a family member in California, a relative named Sylvia, who had started reaching out with concern. When Sylvia asked if everything was okay, Cassie, pretending to be her grandmother, replied that everything was fine. At one point during those 6 days, Johnny's sister Mindy and her boyfriend came to visit the house. They had no idea the 2 bodies were upstairs. Cassie has stated they never went up to the 2nd floor and were only there a few hours late at night. To manage the smell in the house, Cassie poured bleach directly onto her grandparents' bodies, an idea she attributes to Johnny, and the two of them sealed both bedroom doors shut with caulk. Because the original plan, as discussed back at the park, was never just Wendy and Randall. According to Cassie's statement, the full plan was to target both families, hers and Johnny's, before leaving town together, with Florida, somewhere around Pensacola or Panama City, as the intended destination. The reasoning behind staying in the area for several days after the first murders was to gather money and prepare before making that move. During this window, they went to Johnny's house and attacked his sister Mindy and her boyfriend. The plan had been to wait for each family member to arrive home individually so they could be dealt with one at a time. That plan did not hold up in practice, and the attack did not proceed the way they had intended. Both survived. At one point during this period, Cassie referenced the phrase Bonnie and Clyde as how she and Johnny described their plan to each other. Separately, and perhaps more disturbing than anything else in her statement, Cassie told detectives that her own mother had also been part of early discussions, that she, personally, had wanted to kill her mother as well, though Johnny reportedly talked her out of it, telling her they didn't have time. Detectives asked Cassie directly what she was feeling during the murders, whether it was anger, sadness, or something else. Her answer doesn't resolve into a single motive. She described feeling all of it simultaneously: anger, sadness, heartbreak, layered with what she called the rush once the violence started. She has said she felt like she couldn't handle the ongoing conflict with her grandparents anymore, describing a buildup of emotion that had been accumulating for a long time before that night. She has also stated that in the period leading up to the murders, she had contemplated suicide, describing a desire to escape her circumstances entirely, one way or another. When asked directly what she wanted out of all of this, her answer was consistent: to leave. To get away from her family situation and start over with Johnny somewhere else, under different circumstances. The murders, in her own framing, were not the goal. They were the obstacle standing between her and that escape. It's worth being precise here, because this case doesn't offer a clean villain origin story. There's no single event, no singular act of abuse in the public record that explains a decision of this magnitude. What exists instead is a pattern. A teenager who had spent a year running from her home, a boyfriend who had already been contemplating killing his own family before he ever brought up the idea to her, and a shared fantasy of disappearing together that escalated, within the span of one conversation at a park, into an actual plan with a time, a route, and a tool list. Family members in California, including Sylvia, the relative Cassie had been texting while impersonating Wendy, grew increasingly alarmed as the days went on. The responses they were receiving didn't sound right. The calls that used to come every few mornings had stopped entirely. They began contacting the Gwinnett County Police Department, requesting welfare checks on the house. Officers were sent out. On 4 separate occasions they knocked, got no answer, and left. There was, at that point, no legal justification to force entry. People go on trips. People don't always answer their door. By the 5th call in a single week, officers made the decision to enter the home. Inside an upstairs bathroom, they found Wendy's body, hands and ankles bound, throat cut. In an upstairs bedroom, they found Randall, throat also cut. Both bedroom doors had been sealed shut with caulk. The couple had been dead for approximately 6 days. Within hours, the Gwinnett County Police Department released a statement describing the case as unique and disturbing on so many levels, stating that detectives were still exploring motive and adding the line that would come to define how this case is remembered, that they may never find a scenario that makes sense to a reasonable person. In February 2018, both Cassandra Bujork and Johnny Ryder appeared in a Gwinnett County courtroom and pleaded guilty to all charges against them: 2 counts of malice murder for Wendy and Randall, and 2 counts of aggravated assault for the attack on Mindy and her boyfriend. The judge sentenced each of them to 2 life sentences. At the sentencing hearing, Johnny addressed the court. He said he understood what he had done was, in his words, abominable and evil, and that he deserved punishment for it. He apologized directly to the Bujork family for the pain and grief he had caused them. When it was Cassie's turn to speak, she stood. She said nothing. There is a door on the 2nd floor of a house in Gwinnett County that someone once took the time to seal shut with caulk. We can name exactly who did that now. A 17-year-old girl who grew up walking past that door every single day of her life, who let herself back into that house through the back door with her own set of keys to kill the woman who slept behind it. She used a tire iron from her boyfriend's car and butcher knives from her own kitchen drawer She asked her bound grandmother for a safe combination, and her grandmother gave it to her. She spent the money from that safe at a grocery store 2 days later. She answered text messages from a worried relative in her dead grandmother's voice for 6 days, while the bodies lay upstairs behind sealed doors. Wendy Bujork called the police 31 times over the last year of her life, trying to get help for her granddaughter. The 32nd call was the one that found her body. And Randall, quiet in the background of almost every account of this family, spent his final weeks hiding his wallet and his phone under his own mattress. Whatever instinct told him to do that, he never spoke it aloud to anyone. He died in that bed anyway, the wallet still tucked beneath him. Because the person going through his room that night never thought to look there. Gwinnett County Police said on the night the bodies were found that they might never find a scenario in this case that makes sense to a reasonable person. They were right. There's no piece of trauma, no manipulation, no single bad night that fully accounts for what happened in that house. There is only a 17-year-old who wanted out of her life badly enough to take 2 others to do it, and a boyfriend who was already thinking the same thing about his own family before he ever brought it up to her. Somewhere in a Georgia state prison tonight, a woman who is no longer a teenager is serving out 2 life sentences for what happened on Furlong Drive. The doors have long since been unsealed. But the question Gwinnett County Police asked on the very first night has never really been answered. They still don't know why.